Welcome back to Her Rules Radio. I'm Alexandra Jameson, your success, health, life, and business coach. I'm also the creator of the Rich Creatrix method and coaching programs. I've been doing this coaching, writing, podcasting game for about 19 years now. Can you believe it? And in the last 19 years, I co-starred in the Oscar-nominated documentary Super Size Me. I've written 5 books. My next one is coming out in the spring of 2020, co-authored with my husband, Bob Gower. The new title will be Radical Alignment. So excited about this book. So I've been creating stuff for a long time and creating my own business, creating my own lifestyle and business that weave together, that support me and my family in a way that feels really deeply satisfying. And that's what you're here for. You want to create that life, create that way of working, putting your work and your ideas out into the world in a way that's sustainable and sane and feels good to you, feels like you're on purpose. So today I'm going to take you through 9 lessons that I learned from the jerk. What does that mean? Who's the jerk? Okay, some of my favorite books are by musicians and comedians about their lives and careers. I've always been fascinated by musicians, these out there artists, how they work, what's their process, but also how do they manage creating a life and a business by their own rules. Sometimes they have to deal with the rules of the structure in which they work, the record industry, etc. But I also love learning about comedians. I love the science and art of comedy. I love learning how do they manage their mindset, because it's such a grueling profession to be in. And I recently reread one of my favorite memoirs by one of my favorite actors and comedians of all time. Gleaning life lessons through the page, it really helps me see this journey as a pro-creative with some perspective. So last week I reread Steve Martin's Born Standing Up. It's a memoir about his 18 years as a stand-up comedian. Did you ever see his late 70s film, The Jerk? It is one of my favorites. I've also seen Roxanne probably 100 times, and I loved All of Me with Lily Tomlin. She is another one of my favorites. So listening to his book, every few pages, he would share a life or business lesson that just made me jump up and realize all of us driven, dedicated, creative types have similar paths and challenges to success. And I saw that what Steve is sharing, I'm going to call him Steve, me and my buddy Steve Martin, he's sharing these lessons and foundations that are already included in my upcoming 6-month Rich Creatrix mentorship. So here are some of the nuggets of gold and wisdom from my buddy Steve. And I'm going to direct you over to herrulesradio.com/shop to check out and apply to talk with me about the Rich Creatrix mentorship group. Okay, so here's number 1, my number 1 golden nugget of wisdom from Steve Martin. Here's a quote from his book. I did stand-up comedy for 18 years. 10 of those years were spent learning. 4 years were spent refining. And 4 years were spent in wild success. Ooh, what did that tell me? It says keep going. It takes time and commitment to succeed. The second lesson, his quote, your profession will change and so must you. So Steve's comedy evolved from one-liners to political humor to total absurdist ramblings mixed with philosophical prop comedy. So he continued to evolve and build, adding and subtracting from his act to stay relevant and push his own style. This is especially helpful for those of us entrepreneurs and creators who are lifelong learners. If you've doubted your ability as a healer or coach or entrepreneur because you've switched lanes a few times, don't worry. It's part of some people's process. Right? Steve said, your profession will change and so must you. So take out the judgment of how often you have switched topics or switched styles. It's all part of the process. The third lesson, you will use everything you ever knew. So he was actually talking about a time that he was on the Johnny Carson show as a stand-up comedian, which at the time was one of the biggest success points you could have as a comic. And Johnny actually told him, in this profession, you'll use everything you ever knew. So what that said to me was everything in your life, whether you're a doctor or a coach or some other creative entrepreneur, everything is material. Everything is fodder. Your life is filled with lessons to be shared. You'll pull pieces from different schools of thoughts, methodologies, and traditions to create your own unique style. Developing that unique style is hugely important to us authenticity-focused creative types. You're not scatterbrained, you're a creatrix. Lesson number 4, another quote. My tragic home life made me qualified to be a comic. So those of us who find our mess becomes our message know this to be true, right? I had my own health problems in my 20s that turned into a health coaching career. One of my clients is a financial coach who used to be in massive debt, and now she helps others get out of debt. Another client is a marketing and branding coach who needed help with her own messaging. And now she helps other people with their messaging. So we use our pain and turn the journey of discovery and healing into knowledge and then into teaching. There is zero shame in that. In fact, it makes you better at what you do. Number 5 lesson from Steve Martin. My best lessons that made me great were from huge failures. Okay? Steve bombed on stage countless times. In fact, in the book, he goes into gruesome detail about it. But he kept going. He actually started recording all of his stand-up acts so that he could listen to it again and see what was working and what wasn't. Because he learned through the act of doing his comedy what didn't work and eventually what did. I say this to my clients so many times, all the time. I'm like, you have to get out there and start doing. You have to stop thinking and start doing, because through the doing, so many of us learn what works and what doesn't. And I've been there too. I've launched programs that didn't run because enough people didn't sign up. I had a line of supplements that I canceled after months of R&D because it didn't feel aligned and there were copyright issues and it was a no-go. So with dedication and soul-centered searching and support and coaching, you can come out on top. Fail forward. Number 6, professionals pivot. So Steve was a lot of things over his career. You know him probably as an actor, a comedian, but he was a magician, a musician, comedy show writer, a screenwriter, and so much more. He did several jobs at a time to pay the bills and stay in the game, like up until he was at superstar status. He was dedicated and he kept switching things up so that he could keep going and keep learning. I've become a pro pivoter myself. Coaching, writing books, podcasting, consulting businesses and startups, helping entrepreneurs with their own books, helping activists launch their own podcasts, painting, and more. And I enjoy that this entrepreneurial life gives me the chance to be a Renaissance woman, because sometimes a path of creation doesn't work out the way we thought it would. We got to switch things up, but keep moving forward. Number 7. Another great lesson from Steve. Sometimes you got to burn it all down. Several times throughout his book, Steve Martin describes how he had to burn down his 20-minute comedy act and start all over again. Either it wasn't working, the times had changed, the bits got old, or towards the kind of middle of his career, I'll say the early middle of his career, he realized that he still had old bits in there that were copied from other people, like old-timey comedians. And he realized that he had to burn it all down. He had to start all over. Entire movie scripts were scrapped. Does that seem heartbreaking? Well, maybe, but it's a fact that we have to be willing to walk away from something that isn't working and bring forward our smarts, our energy, our skills, and experience to a fresh new way of doing things. I have burned down my business several times, and like a phoenix, have always risen strong and beautiful again from the ashes, if I do say so myself. I used to be a well-known vegan chef, but I had to shut that all down when I needed to eat animal protein for my health. Shutting down my supplement and health coaching business allowed me to pivot and rebuild this creative entrepreneur coaching. So from the ashes, you can build something more you, more satisfying, more aligned, and even more profitable. The 8th lesson I learned: DIY. Even pros do a lot of it themselves until they don't. So when Steve was in the busiest final years of his stand-up career, he was still doing a lot of the work himself. And up until he hit that breakthrough, outrageous success, he was doing almost all of it himself, from writing to driving to, overnight, 60 performances in 3 months. From all of these, he had this DIY spirit. And many of us do a lot of our back end or technical work ourselves until we reach the point, like Steve did, where we need to bring in managers, assistants, and coaches. When you reach that point where you can no longer do it all yourself, it's time to hire a pro. That's what Steve did. He was recording his own stuff, and then he finally switched over to working with an editor and recorder. He was booking all of his own stuff, and then he finally switched over to having a manager. And that's where I come in. And it's why I've hired my own coaches and consultants and assistants over the years. Get comfortable with that cycle. It's part of what makes us professionals. And the final lesson that I got from his great book is sometimes you got to go against the grain. Part of what helped Steve Martin stand out in his stand-up act was being different. He went against the grain. So in the 60s, when most performers wore hippie garb, flower power and loose sleeves and such and jeans, Steve adopted this conservative white suit. When everyone else was getting political in their act, he dropped all of his political jokes and went totally absurdist. To be recognized for our work, we have to risk standing out in direct opposition to current trends. And to be true originals, we have to do the work of not copying others in our field. Now, I have been a chameleon in the past, and I have to work extra hard not to unconsciously copy or look like others in my field. It takes digging to really get into your authentic message and look and style. My old story of coming out as no longer vegan is the biggest example from my life and work. Veganism was just hitting this huge global trend when I said, I've been doing this for 10 years and it's not working for me. It has to be authentic. It has to be a true message and experience. People can smell lies. But how can you go against the grain in your work in an authentic, honest way? So those are the 9 lessons that I picked up from Steve Martin's great book. It's so fabulous. I highly recommend it. If you're into comedy and the art of entrepreneurialism as a creative, which is what I am all about. So the Rich Creatrix mentorship is opening up. It's open to 10 women and 2 spots are already filled. Our first group coaching session takes place August 15th, and we have a group retreat the last Thursday and Friday of September in New York City. If you are ready to have the support and coaching and wisdom of myself and the other women that are going to be in this group, go to herrulesradio.com/shop and click the application button for the Rich Creatrix mentorship. On the application page, you will see all the details of what's included, and fill out the application. You are not obligated to join, but once I read your application and if it feels like we're a pretty good fit, you and I will set up a time to talk one-on-one privately about what it is, what you want to do, and whether or not we're a good fit to work together. So thank you for listening. I really appreciate you showing up for yourself by being here. Have a beautiful week. I'll be back soon. Mwah!